Hey everybody, got my quarantine shirt on, and I am ready to tell you a little bit about Othello, help you through the notes that I already gave you. I'm going to share my PowerPoint screen with you real quick, walk you through a couple notes. There we go. Okay, so I already gave you some background on Shakespeare, and we already talked about the sonnets. You did pretty well with those. So Othello is a tragedy. It's Shakespeare is known for his comedies, his tragedies, his histories. This is the tragedy. It's the tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice. And you won't get to the tragic parts this week, but they're coming, I promise. You already know a lot about Billy Shakes at this point, but know that he was writing a lot of very different things and very complex things. The history behind Othello is particularly interesting and complex. So Othello is constantly referred to as the Moor of Venice. Moor, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's something that you tie a boat to, right? That's not what we're talking about. In Shakespearean England and Renaissance England and Renaissance Europe, Moor was this really complex term that meant a lot of different things. It comes from the Arabic Peninsula, and it comes from a term for Arabic people that would come from the Middle East and they kind of traveled broadly. But the problem is that people didn't really understand the Arabic region, and they didn't understand the religion that came from the Arabic region. So at one point, Moor would designate a certain Arabic ethnic group, but later it became confused for anybody who was Islamic, anybody who was Muslim. But Muslim and Arabic are not necessarily synonymous. Islam is practiced widely in the Arabic world, but just because somebody is Arabic does not mean that they're Islamic. It also was a term that would refer to Islamic people from Northern Africa or for the Berber coast. And that for a while was like a proper designation, but then this all became confused. And so because people basically never knew what Moor meant, they just simply used it to refer to anybody who was Muslim for a while, or anybody who wasn't white, anybody who seemed like they came from some kind of Oriental place, like the Arabic area. And it was this kind of ignorant term, but Shakespeare isn't necessarily using it that way. And it's not entirely derogatory. It's just something that could mean a lot of different things. And it could just mean a religious other too. So anybody who isn't white or isn't a Christian in Renaissance England could have been easily called a Moor. It's even more interesting because there was for several centuries Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula and parts of Europe. So especially Spain, the southern parts of Spain were ruled by Muslims and this Moorish empire from 711 up through I think the 1400s. And the culture remained until the 1600s. So this culture was very much a part of Europe too. And as it kind of faded away and it had been gone for 100 years or so by Shakespeare's time, the term stayed, even though people didn't really know what they meant. This takes place, probably Shakespeare wrote it in 1603, probably took place 30 or 40 years before that, in the most serene Republic of Venice. So if you see Venice there, and you can see how the Republic actually spread out. It wasn't just part of Venice. The map looks upside down to me at this point, but it was an independent city-state. Venice is, of course, a very beautiful city in southern, and actually kind of the northern. There's another map I'll show you. It's up on the sea in Italy. And it was an independent city-state. It was ruled by a doge, and the full name was the Most Serene Republic of Venice. And they were basically, they dominated and they expanded like a small empire all across the Mediterranean Sea and across all of the Mediterranean trade routes. And they did this for several hundred years. They were independent from the rest of Italy. And they had quite a navy and quite a military presence for a long time. Part of the play also takes place on Cyprus, and so you'll see the A is actually the part of Italy where Venice would have been originally, and the Venetian Empire at this point would have come down both the Italian coast and the other side of the sea there into Croatia and down through Albania. And the people that the most serene Republic of Venice is at war with right now are the Turks, the Ottoman Empire from Turkey. And you can see Turkey on the other side of the body of water there, right, on the other side of the Mediterranean. And the island where most of the play takes place is Cyprus, where the B is. You can see how close it is to Turkey, but this is very important for trade routes. The most serene Republic of Venice wants it, Turkey wants it, and they fought over this land for centuries. It's really interesting that both the Venetian Navy and the Turkish Navy were at war for a very, very long time, from 1396 to 1718. So when we're talking about, the Turkish wars, it's Turkey in a couple different articulations, but this is the Ottoman Empire, which lasted from the 13th century to 1922. It didn't disband until after World War I. Can you imagine how long that empire has lasted? But they were constantly at war with Venice over trade routes and, the proximity to different trade routes. And Cyprus is really key. Not to mention, it's a beautiful, beautiful island. And so you're going to see a lot of context on a lot of that setting be important. We open in Venice, but we eventually get to Cyprus. We have Othello here on which would be the far left. This is an adaptation that we'll watch part of next week. I'll upload it for you. It's Lawrence Fishburne, same guy from The Matrix, playing Othello, the Moor of Venice. And then right next to him is Iago, my favorite villain of all time, probably, and he's played by Kenneth Branagh there. Iago, that's where the parrot from Aladdin got the name. But this is one of my favorite performances. Some people have some problems with it, but it's been performed across, since Shakespeare's time, widely performed, widely received well. On the right there, you have another famous performance of Othello. This is Laurence Olivier, a very famous Shakespeare actor, but he's performing Othello in blackface, which was widely accepted for a long time. Blackface is not good. And so some of those performances come into question. And so we have to consider important questions about Shakespeare's race. The notes, not Shakespeare's race, I'm sorry, Othello's race. The notes deal with that a little bit too, that, Othello is not white. And that seems to matter to some of the people, especially Iago and Desdemona's father, Brabantio. So anyway, hope you like it. Read the first 3 acts. You'll have a couple discussion questions to choose from in a quiz, and we'll finish it off next week and watch some parts of it. It's a very, very engaging play. It's a very powerful play. Hope you like it.